Hey, it's Louis Max for Grind&Pivot. So I had an amazing conversation with Big Mitch Smiley, who spent 38 straight years in the California prison system. He's out, he's thriving, and he has a wild story to tell.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
What up, son? What up? Grind&Pivot, Queens, New York. Tonight, making a special New York City appearance, an incredible artist, even better tattooist, up-and-coming YouTube icon, and budding fashionista, the one, the only, Hard Intentions, Uncle Mitch Smiley. What's up, my brother? How are you?
Fine. How are you doing, Louis?
Doing great. How you making out there with the COVID virus?
We're doing all right. The wife works at the hospital, and then, I'm here doing artwork. And, I got to take off once in a while, get a motorcycle ride. But other than that, I'm doing all right.
Glad to hear you getting out in the wind.
Yeah, other than that, I stay home and just do my art and shit around the house,
So for the people out there listening for the first time, I want to let them know how I found you. You probably don't even know how I found you.
I don't.
So I've been following a lot of the prison genre channels on YouTube and on the web. And I think back in November or December, I was listening to Lockdown 23-1, Shot Out to Death.
Right.
And I saw they had this guest on. And it said you've done quite a bit of time, which you'll tell us about in the California pen. And I'm listening and I'm saying, this guy is unbelievable. He's got a great story. He's doing well right now. And I'm thinking to myself, he's got to have his own channel some way, somehow. Not for less than a minute later, Death says, Mitch, you got to have your own channel. And I was like, right, absolutely, 100%. So I think about a week or two later, I'm following some things. I'm looking through YouTube, and all of a sudden, bam, I see the first Hard Intentions channel video. Uncle Mitch is there. That was it. It's all over. Shut the lights. I'm a believer. So here we are. I finally reached out to you, and you said you'd be happy to interview. And I want to give you a shot here. So tell the people, where the hell you been for the last 38 years?
Sure. My name's Mitch Smiley, and I'm from San Diego, California. I was born in San Jose. Then my family moved down to San Diego when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I grew up down there in San Diego, Southern California, down by the border. And, that's where I'm from. I come from, kind of a semi-shitty upbringing. And, I ended up in prison when I was 17 for, bar fight gone bad. I got 2 co-defendants, and one of them was getting beaten up, and I stepped in to help him out. And my other co-defendant stabbed the guy that started the fight. And you either snitch or go to jail, and I went to jail. So I did a few years in prison, and I'm out now. I've been out for about 27 months. No, actually about 31 months, excuse me.
So you're still on paper, correct?
I'm still on paper I have a review in 5 months to get off parole. Hopefully they'll let me off early.
So when you do get off papers, I got a great steakhouse to take you in New York. The situation is pretty bad here.
Yeah, we got the updates from New York, and it's ugly,
So I know you got to prison at a very early age, I think around 17. You're so young. How did you cope with day-to-day life? I mean, you're just a kid.
Well, it's different levels, because like when I first went to prison was one way. And then about halfway through, I did 38 years in prison. For people that don't know, I did 38 years, 6 months, and a few days in prison. So, and I got busted when I was 17. And I come from a background of, I hung around outlaw motorcycle clubs when I was young, and that's kind of what led me to prison. The victim of our crime was in a motorcycle club, and So anyway, like I said, out here in California, we got a governor around 1990, 91 named Pete Wilson, and his dad was a cop who was murdered by an ex-convict in Boston when he was a kid. So he had a little hatred towards us, and so around his era, he changed the prison system. And but prior to that, when I first went in, I gravitated towards other guys that were motorcycle outlaw type guys, and I met a couple of them. Who taught me how to live in there, and it's like, I was fucking up. I got a stabbing when I first went to prison. There was a lot of racial shit going on between whites and blacks. And so I got a stabbing. I did a term in the hole, which we call the SHU. It's security housing unit. And then when I got out of the SHU, I went to what's called, I spent 4.5 years in the SHU. And I did a security housing decompression unit. It was a program to help you uh, figure out how to live out on the main line. And there was another guy in there. He was in a motorcycle club, and I kind of liked him. He was a few years older than me. I'm 59 now. He's 64, so that gives you, he's about 5 or 6 years older than me. And him and a couple other guys that were bikers, they taught me how to live, and they basically told me, look, youngster, you want to be comfortable and party and make money, or do you want to go to the hole? You want to spend the rest of your term in the hole, or do you want to party, make money, and be comfortable? And I said, hey man, I want to be comfortable. I want to make money. I want to party. Back then I used to, drink wine. People call it pruno. We just call it wine. I used to drink wine, smoke weed, all that, snort crack. I was young, and had a life sentence, and so that was my deal. I wanted to be comfortable, and so they taught me how to do that. They got me into hobby, and taught me the importance of having a job in prison. The benefits of having a job in prison. Not only get a little pay number, but it gets you out of your cell. It gets you allowed to move around the prison, and they taught me, like if you're partying, you're snorting a little speed. You can't change your program. You got to maintain the same demeanor all the time. You got to be the same all the time. Otherwise, the cops notice it. They teach you little shit like that. Then they got me into hobby. I was in a wood shop, and I used to do wood hobby. I got into my artwork and tattooing. I tattooed a few of these guys, and so basically, they taught me how to live in prison when I was a young guy.
So this was in the late 70s, early 80s, right?
I got arrested in 1979. I got to prison in 80. Yeah. So it's the early 80s.
So I got a question for you. The prison system now, it's a lot different than it was back then, right?
It's 100% different. It's did a total 180. It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, because listening to some of the other prison channels out there, these guys talk about like going to gladiator school where it was just young bucks going off. Uh, it seems
Right.
like back then you had a chance to be a little bit more rehabilitative. Is that what, if you wanted it to be, is that how it was?
Well, yeah, back in the day, every prison had vocational training. They had education programs for people who wanted them. Uh, Prison wasn't an industry. It wasn't a moneymaker for politicians when I went to prison. Uh, they had 27,000 guys in state prison in California. When I got, at one point, they had 180,000 guys in prison in California. So it changed. But yeah, you had guys going to prison in California, man, that were they were criminals. They were outlaws, and they didn't use drugs solely to use drugs. I mean, they weren't. That wasn't. Uh, Guys told me drugs are for having fun and making money. And so you had guys that would come in prison every 3 or 4 years. You'd see them. They do 3, 4, 5 years, get out. They stay out for anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and they pop back in, for a little bit. But they were out there making money off crime. And
So they were really in the streets, never thinking about going straight in any way.
yeah, they were criminals. They were outlaws. And sure, and So they would be slinging dope, doing armed robberies. I had a homeboy that robbed all the way from San Diego up to Seattle, Washington, and back. I mean, to make money. And it wasn't because he was a dope fiend. That just was his gig, man. He was an armed robber, and them guys would get caught and they'd do a few years here and there. And when they were out, they'd write people, send a little money, a package or whatever. And so and when they were in prison, they had job skills. They'd come in and work in the carpenter shop or the plumbing shop, and then for guys like me that was doing a life sentence, I'd be slinging a little dope, trying to make some money. Those were the guys, they had money. They'd buy a little bit here and there, and it was a different kind of economy, and then around 91, Pete Wilson came in and changed the game, and he started telling guys with life terms they would never get out. They came out with a 3 strikes law, and those guys, they stopped coming to prison. I started noticing that, hey, where's Joe or where's old Bob? I ain't seen him in 10 years. Well, they just quit coming because the penalty was not worth, huh? It wasn't worth, yeah, it wasn't worth the risk, you know. The penalty,
They were smart enough to see.
right? They were smart enough to realize, look, man, if I get caught next time, it ain't going to be 3 to 5 years. It's going to be 25 to life or 50 years, or So they quit coming around, and we started getting these guys coming to prison, man. That drugs were their whole life, Plus, the drugs started changing. Like crank was no longer crank. I quit using it. The bikers kind of backed up off the manufacturing of speed, and it kind of became a thing from Mexico, and it just became. Guys were their addiction was their life. I mean, it was no longer about partying, having fun, making money. It was just addiction, and so now I'm dealing with guys. All they know is drugs, crack, this weird meth shit they smoke. The only way you can use it is smoke it. It just changed, man. And they weren't involved with trying to be comfortable and trying to make money and keep their head above water while they're in prison. They didn't care. As long as they could get high, they didn't care. And so it was just a whole different mindset.
So prior to going to prison,
Yeah.
what was it like growing up? You have any brothers, any sisters?
No, I don't have any brothers or sisters. No, no. I have a cousin that's kind of close to the closest thing I have to a brother would be my cousin.
So you're running the
Yeah,
streets as a young gun early on, and it went south. Can you tell us about when actually it did start to go bad for you?
yeah.
Were you anxious? Were you pissed off? Angry? All of the above?
Well, all the above. I mean, my dad was my dad. My real dad split when I was a year and a half old, so I was raised with my stepdad. He was a roofer, Korean War veteran, alcoholic. He was a roofer from the time he was 16 years old. He was a hard dude. I seen him fire a guy and throw him off the roof one time. On the job site. I mean, he was an asshole. Come home happy one day, mad the next, beat the crap out of you. So, I would say growing up, man, I was frustrated all the time. I had probably some depression issues. Like one time, I used to ride my bicycle like 5, 6 miles to go to football practice when I was a little kid, Pop Warner, and then my mom would pick me up and drive me home after practice, and we came home late one night, and he got all pissed off, beat my mom, just he was an asshole. So no more football. That was the end of football, so I mean, yeah, I was frustrated, I was angry, I was depressed, I had issues, man. Uh,
It sounds like he definitely had some issues. On one hand, now that you're older, do you think that he did what he could with you and your mom?
yeah, but on the other hand, too, my mom's real narcissistic. My mom's real controlling. So on the other hand, I had her trying to control my life as a kid, uh, and she's real self-centered, narcissistic. I mean, beyond what you could imagine. So he was dealing with that too. he married her. He was older than her. Probably had to, hey, I got a young chick. Yeah, I got to deal with his kid. But and then she's in his face all the time with her bullshit. So none of that helped. And yeah, it was.
So you're into football, that I know. Any other sports?
I was into football. I was into baseball a little bit, but I was into football. I like to hit people, man. I like to play.
You were a pretty big dude back then, right?
Yeah, I was a big kid. I was big for my age. The age group that I was by the third year of Pop Warner, I weighed way too much to be in that age bracket of Pop Warner. So I mean, but like I played defensive line and linebacker, and I'd clothesline guys, and I just do all. I like to hit guy. It was a good outlet for my aggression. I loved it. Yeah.
So in prison, I know you were a star handball player. What about football? Did you play football in prison? Was it like the longest yard, like
Yeah.
in the movies?
Nah, longest yard's a bit of a stretch, but back in the day in San Quentin, like this is another thing way prisons have changed. They had the San Quentin Pirates, and they would play tackle football with the Marines, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and they would play like Christian colleges would come in and play the San Quentin Pirates. They had a football field, and they had blacks, whites, Mexicans playing football on a tackle football team that played outside teams. Same with hardball. They had hardball, different races playing. And we also had softball, for guys that couldn't make the cut on the hard teams, they had softball and like the white team would play the black team or the Mexican team or, so on and so forth. And then later on, around the late 90s, they said no interracial sports. So white softball team could only play the South Side or Mexican softball team. It couldn't play against the blacks or Northerners or the others. And I'm like, what's wrong with you dudes, man? What are you scared of them guys? Or
Yeah. What the fuck? Why would they do something like that? Because of the race relations?
I think it's just a way for we got to remember, man, all the prison gangs in California got locked up in 1986. They gave them all indeterminate shoot terms, so they put them in the hole indefinitely, and that lasted about 30 years. And so a lot of these guys would say, hey, the big homies don't want us playing interracial sports, especially for like the Southsiders, the prison gang that kind of runs their show for them. And then the white dudes would follow suit. And so you got to remember too, when I went to prison, man, guys could only go to protective custody if they got stabbed or if they were dropping out of a prison gang and they were snitching on everybody and their mother. And then more and more guys, as the system got bigger, they started creating whole prisons for guys that wanted to go to protective custody, and they changed the name of it to sensitive needs yard, SNY. And so a lot of white dudes, specifically speaking for, because I'm white, they would run up drug debts and they couldn't pay. And when they knew their number was going to be punched, because that's a killing offense in prison if you don't pay your debts, they would lock up and go to SNY. Guys would join gangs, the newer prison gangs. And then once, hey, I'm in a prison gang. So then they would go out and suck up all the drugs and they'd do stupid shit. And then same thing when they had to put in some work or something, they'd check in, they go to SNY. So for whites, our numbers got on the general population, the mainline, our numbers got smaller and smaller and smaller. And there were more and more whites in the SNY yards who just looked, they took the easy way out and checked in. And so a lot of white dudes would start taking their cue from the Southern Mexicans instead of just running with whites. Whereas when I first went to prison, white dudes are pretty strong. They didn't take influence from nobody. I mean, so yeah, that's another way the system changed.
Wow, interesting, really interesting. I have a question that I've been thinking about asking. Let's go back to in the beginning when you first got there. Uh, what was it like going to sleep? Were you ever able to sleep soundly? What was it like when your head hit that pillow? for the first couple of years, and then even did you ever even go to sleep soundly?
Well, I've never really slept well, even when I was a kid, and even now, like, I sleep well about every 3 or 4 nights, every 3rd or 4th night, I'll get a good night's sleep, but, I have never really slept well, and I never really slept well in prison. Maybe once a week in prison, I get a good night's sleep. Usually, I get like 2 or 3 hours sleep. And so, when I first went to prison, it was, murder madness. So, I mean, you think about, if you're smart, you think about when you have alone time in your head, you can think about all the different moves people made throughout the day. Um, you know, because I was involved with certain stuff, right? Like illegal activities. So there were other guys involved with illegal activities. So like some guy might be selling speed and he'll put some guy in debt because he doesn't like some other guy, and he's going to use this guy that he put in debt to stab the guy he don't like to pay his debt. He's going to stab somebody for that guy. So you had to know who had a dope sack, who was in debt to that guy, and not just one guy, but all of them. You know, all the white guys, all the Mexican guys, and some of the black guys. You had to know who was doing what and who owed them money, who was their road dogs, and who was their homeboys, and who was hooked up in a tip, a gang, and I mean, it was just you had to keep all that stuff in your head. Change, yeah, and it changed daily. It's a super stressful environment, and so I would just lay there at night, man. If I couldn't sleep, or I'd sleep for 2 3 hours, and then keep run all that shit to my brain. But I would just lay there and rest. Put a wet rag over my eyes maybe, and just rest, and then maybe get another hour or two sleep before they crack the door in the morning. So it was rough, and really that never changed throughout my whole term, you
So
know.
that lack of sleep probably affected you quite a bit.
Yeah.
Was there anybody early on that helped you out,
Oh yeah.
helped you adjust a little bit? And are you in touch with anybody now?
Yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, yeah. Um, like I said, I gravitated towards, the outlaw biker type guys because that's what I grew up around. And I have a friend, he was in a motorcycle club, and I have another friend, he was from Oakland, Dirty Dennis. He's passed away since then, but he's from Oakland, and he grew up around a motorcycle club over there. And he got busted in 1970, so he's older than me, and he was the other guy was from L.A. and he was in a different motorcycle club. But it was funny because these guys at one time were cellies, and one guy had all his colors on one side of the cell, and the other guy had his other different color on his side of the cell, and it was like one side of the cell was green, the other side was red. But both them guys are my friends, and I lived with Dirty Dennis for quite a while, and like I said, he got out and passed away, and then the other one is out now, and he's in another state, and he's doing well, and he's still involved with his motorcycle club, but those guys taught me how to live in there, man. And I remember one time I had this guy popped in, and he'd come from a different prison where, I had guys in that prison that I didn't particularly like. They didn't like me, and he was a part of that scene. And he popped in, and so I told this guy, I said, "Hey, give me a knife." He's like, "What do you need a knife for?" I was like 22 years old, and he says, "What do you want a knife for?" I said, "I'm gonna stab that dude. I ain't gonna sit around here and wait." Because guys would, there's no. Everyone has this big glorious picture of honor and all that. Guys would stab you in the back. They didn't come to your face and tell you, "I got a problem with you," and stab you. They would slide up behind you and stick a couple holes in your back and kill you. So I told my friend, I said, "Hey man, I'm not going to sit around here and wait for that dude to do something. I'm going to kill him while I got a chance." And he looked at me real serious. He goes, "Look, that guy's not going to do anything to you. If I thought he was going to hurt you, I'd go stab him myself." And I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm 100% sure." And then a couple of days later, that guy came and talked to me, and he goes, "Hey man, I don't have nothing against you," and blah blah blah. And so he went and told that dude, "Hey, you better talk to this youngster because he wants to do something to you, but and I happen to know that what that guy said is true because there was a guy at a different prison. prior to the one we were at the time, and you know, he told him, "Hey, I want you to go do something," and the guy told him no, and so this guy was a prospect for this motorcycle club that this guy happened to be a part of. And he told me, you know, I'm a prospect and I'm not going to do that. And he told me, "You're through, dummy." And he went and did it himself. And that was his motto. You know, I never ask anybody to do something I won't do myself. And I seen that firsthand. You know, that was he lived by that motto. And then that's kind of something I live by, you know. So I had some positive influences. You know, these guys were, you know, there were guys getting murdered pretty regular in prison in California at that time. So these guys are like father figures to me. And you know, it might seem kind of weird, you know, you're in prison, but man, I was a teenager in early 20s. These guys already did, you know, about 10 years, 15 years. And you know, they taught me how to live in there, man. And I'm
How about on the other side, the COs? I know you've mentioned some guys' names. Anyone stand out? I know because you hear a lot of stories of asshole COs and COs that actually treat people like humans.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, there were free staff that treated us all right. You know, every once in a while you run into a cook or you know, somebody in maintenance. Like they had the guy that ran a carpenter shop in one prison. He ran all the NA meetings. He treated us well. Yeah, I remember one time there was this guy. He was from Lithuania. His family came over here out at the end of World War II from Lithuania. He was actually born there and came here, and he was a guard, you know. He was fully tattooed. You know, he rode motorcycles. He had a hot rod, you know, and all that. And you know, he came to the kitchen. You know, I worked in the back dock, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to do this, that, and the other." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." You know, I'm eating. And back then, I'm driving iron. You know, I got a plate of eggs and potatoes and cereal. I'm like eating, and he tells me to do all this stuff, and I tell him, "Yeah, sure." You know, and he stands there looking at me like, "What the fuck? Get up and do it." And I said, "Look, I don't do shit till I'm done eating." You know, and you know, I did my work, you know, and all that shit, got everything done. He comes back with a 6-pack of sodas and says, "Hey, pass him out to the guys." And tells me, "You want to be the lead man back here?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, you know, whatever." But that guy told me stories about, you know, he would go to parties, man. He'd say, "Hey, you see that so and so, you know, female officers with Captain so and so, or you know, some associate wardens dating this female cop." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I fucked every one of these bitches that work here." And he would go to parties, man, and like there was a program administrator, and he was at a party with him. He pissed on the guy's leg, you know. So they hated this dude. You know, to him it was a job, you know, and he didn't like them guys that were like crime fighter types. So you know, you have interaction with staff like that once in a while. They're decent, you know.
Ha, that's a classic story.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I know from listening to you, your mantra is pretty much respect one another, don't care if you're black, white, or purple.
right.
So, how are you able to adjust and then just kind of walk away from someone who is just a complete asshole without resorting to violence? When did that change for you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I was younger. I wouldn't give a shit. I mean, I'd smack people around or whatever. But, um, you know, this guy taught me when I was younger, man. He gets if you got a problem with somebody, and you give them a way out, right? He goes, if they take it, you won. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He says, if you offer a guy a way out by like whatever your issue is, and you give him a way out, and he takes it, then he's peeing on himself, basically, and you win. You know, he's peeing. He's not standing his ground with this issue, and you are, and he takes the way out, then you won. And yeah, and so it lets you know that hey, you know, the guy took his way out because he's a weak motherfucker, and you know, you didn't need to smack him around. And another guy told me, hey, look, brother, you know, guys that got a killing coming, they're gonna get it. You don't have to be the one giving it to them, you know. And so, you know, that's the kind of mentality the guy I started to develop, especially with these kids, man. You know, that started coming in the later years. You know, once I got a little gray in the beard and had a little time under my belt, you know, I run into these kids, try to tell you how to live, man. I just let them know, look, dude, you know, like I tell me, you don't want to make me paranoid, you know. Yeah, I mean, they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Look, I'm the last guy you wanna make paranoid, all right?" And they're like, "Well, what's that mean?" If they didn't get the hint, I'd tell them, "Look, uh, I'll kill you."
Hey, thanks so much for listening to part one. Stay tuned for part two, where Big Mitch talks about music, the pivotal moment that changed everything, and a classic story that almost ruined his release date. Later, son.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.